Hey folks, this is Tock from Tock Custom. In the last video we spent some time getting all of our panels of fabric ready for sewing a custom messenger bag. So in this one we're going to show you how to make your own adjustable strap and how to attach it onto your bag. So to get started on the beginning of the messenger bag, the first thing I always do after I prepared everything is make the strap. So for this part you're going to need your two interfaced and padded gussets, your strap lining, and the top strap panels. I also have two metal 2-inch tri-glide buckles, and this is what you need in order to make an adjustable strap. This is an optional step. If you just want to make a fixed strap, that's totally fine, but I'll be showing you how to do, well, both actually. So let's get started with how we need to start putting the strap together. The first thing we need to do to start our strap is put your panels right side together. So I got two pieces of red, put them right sides together, and we're just going to stitch on a 1/2 inch seam allowance right on this edge here. And we're going to do the same thing for the lining piece. Now these are sewn together, and I took them over to my ironing board and I pressed the seams open. That's going to help them lay flat when we sew this whole thing together. Also, if you're going to be doing an adjustable strap with these buckles, make sure you add about 4 inches to these panels before you cut them out, because when you do the adjustable part, it's going to take away a lot of your strap from you. So make sure you cut extra. Otherwise, if you're doing a standard strap, you can just cut it out the way the pattern says so. Alright, next, to join these together, I'm going to put the interfaced one side face up, and then I'm going to put these right sides together. So I'm going to match up the center seam, and then I'm just going to take a bunch of pins and just on one side, make sure they're nice and even. I'm going to pin these together all the way down to this side, and then I'm going to pin them together all the way down this side here. And then we're going to sew this whole thing together on a 1/2 inch seam allowance. Okay, we're ready for sewing, so I'm going to go stitch these together on our 1/2 inch seam allowance all the way across. Alright, now this is sewn together, so you should have your two colors with a nice clean seam. So this part is going to take a lot of trimming and ironing. So what you want to do is trim your seam down to about a 1/4 inch. It doesn't really matter so long as it's really short, because when you end up turning this strap right side out, you want very little bulk on the inside so that it lays nice and flat. So I'm just going to very carefully just trim this as short as I can without getting too close to the stitches. And then the next part is going to be ironing this whole thing. Alright, so come over to your ironing board, and this thing is usually way too long to fit on an ironing table, so what I usually do is lay it face down and try to kind of open the seam up a little bit. And then I'm going to take my iron and try to press the seam. The seam is going to want to fall towards the lining because this other side is interfaced. So first thing I always do is try to pull the seam real tight. We're going to press the seam that's left towards the top part. So in my case, that's the red fabric. So I'm going to press all this over towards the other side. And this is going to help our bag lay nice and, this is going to help our strap lay nice and flat for when we go to top stitch it, so it looks really clean. Alright, so this is pressed open, so if you turn it over now, you should see that it's laying nice and flat. So you shouldn't see any real bubbles or puckers in the fabric. This should just be one really long, solid piece of fabric now. So now that we're done pressing, something I like to do before we're done finishing the strap is I like to put a little top stitch right over these seams just to keep everything nice and flat, and it gives it a really cool look when it's done. So I'm just gonna do 2 little stitches over each side of the seam that we made here. And all of the top stitching for this bag is going to be a gold top stitch. So if you have 2 sewing machines, using one as a top stitching station and the other for construction is really helpful. Otherwise, if you only have one and you don't mind switching thread, that works too. Okay, so having top stitched that, now we have 2 nice clean gold top stitches running over the whole seam there. Alright, now we have to do a lot of pressing. So what we're going to do is we're going to turn in each side 1/2 inch and press it into shape so that all of the raw edges are hidden on the inside of the strap. And then we're going to iron it down and top stitch everything so it looks nice and pretty on the outside. So if you have just like an index card, you can just measure out 1/2 inch on an index card and then just press right over it. So that's a good way to do it. Otherwise, you can just use a ruler or something like that. If you're doing an adjustable strap, you can also take your tri-glide buckle and you can hold it right over the stitches from the seam and then fold your strap so it just fits on the inside of your buckle. I'll zoom in so you can see it. So if you want to use your tri-glide to measure, this is a 2-inch tri-glide. So if you can see the stitches right here, I'm going to roll this over about 1/2 inch and I'm going to put one edge right where those stitches are, and then the other edge should just barely fit this red fabric on the inside. So this is what you're looking for. You want this to be from the edge here to the stitches on the inside of the loop. So once you figure out how you're going to measure, just pick whichever way works best, and then go ahead and iron all the way down both sides so that they fit. If you can do the lining side a little bit smaller than your top side, it's going to look better because then your lining is going to be a little bit recessed on the underneath side, so you won't see any of your lining fabric underneath. Okay, the next thing we need to do is grab your lining side. You're going to want to pull it up to the center seam. And what it should look like is you should see a little bit of red on the back side and a little bit of red on the front side. So you want to see your lining completely hidden by the top panel of fabric there. So if that looks right, if it doesn't look right, you can go back and repress it. So if that looks right, match up everything and you can start to press your strap into shape. So we got everything looking good so far. I'm just gonna follow this all the way to each end. And if you press it into shape, it should kind of stay there for a little while so we can pin it later and then top stitch it. Okay, perfect. Let's go back over to our cutting table. So what I usually do is lay it nice and flat, and you can kind of move it around if you need to, but I pull the seams together real good. I'm going to zoom in so you can see. So I'm going to take, alright, so get your edges together, and I'm going to take some pins and I put it in on the outside, right through the edge of the lining, through all the layers, and we're going to pull it out so that the head of the pin is on the outside. That makes it really easy to take out while you're top stitching the whole thing together. So then just keep moving down, and I usually do about, I don't know, 4 or 5 pins on each side, right into the edge, through all layers, and out the other side. So do this all the way down each side of the strap. This is all pinned together now. So what we're gonna do is run this all the way through our top stitching station with yellow thread, and I'm going to just stitch as close to the edge as I can where I know I'm still going to pick up the lining on the back side. So the top is going to be yellow stitches, and underneath is all going to be white bobbin thread. Keep in mind your bobbin thread when you're top stitching. Okay, so we are going to do this stitch. And make sure you pull your pins out before you go over them. If you don't, you will get some bubbles and puckers, and it just does not look good. After I top stitch one side, sometimes the fabric kind of bunches up a little bit, so I like to press it one more time just to make sure it's absolutely flat before we do the second one. That way you don't get any issues, and this thing is going to look really good when it's done. Now we can just finish this by top stitching the other side all the way down, and then the strap is done. Okay, this all turned out great. So you should have a nice flat strap with your top stitch, and check the bottom to make sure that your bobbin thread covered the lining on both sides, otherwise you're going to have some problems with your strap opening up. Now we can take our strap and just kind of put it aside for right now. This all came out really well. So this will be fine. So we are going to prepare our gusset panels. Gussets are what make up the outside sides and bottom of your bag, and then we're going to attach the flap and the front accent on later. But your strap is going to connect onto these gussets. So to get these ready, just put them together, and I'm going to put a pin between them, and then we're just going to stitch these together on the bottom edge on a 1/2 inch seam allowance. And sometimes the batting will make it look bigger than it really is, so make sure you're looking at the fabric. Okay, these are sewn together now, and I did the same thing like with the strap, so I pressed this seam open, and on the right side I'm going to do the same thing with doing 2 yellow top stitches down the center to hold the seam open so it stays nice and flat. Alright, so now these are nice and pressed, and we have a nice yellow top stitch running between them, so that'll look good when it is all put together. If you're planning on doing an adjustable strap, you need to cut off about 7 inches from what we just made with the strap, so I did that already. And then we're going to use that to fit a buckle. Okay, so here's a close-up of how I put the fixed buckle in. So I'm going to fold this over like that, so it looks like that on the outside, and then I'm going to fold this up and in, and they don't need to overlap too much, so long as when you look at it from the outside that it looks nice and clean, so that when we stitch this to the bag it'll look good. Before I stitch this, so this will go just like this here. You want to make sure you're about 1 inch from the edge, maybe a little bit more. And before I even pin this into place before stitching, I'm going to press this so it all lays flat. So I'm going to go press this just like this with the buckle in there right now. Alright, so that's nice and pressed. I'm going to put this just the way I want it to look when the bag is complete. And I'm going to take a single pin, just try to put it through all the layers right in the middle on the bottom, and then come up the other side with it. So this should hold it in place for long enough for me to start my box stitch. I do a box stitch the same every single time, and the way I do it is I start on the top left corner and I go across, down, across, up. Then I do a diagonal, go along the bottom, another diagonal, and back across to where I started. That's how I do it every single time, and it always works just fine. Alright, so now we're at our sewing machine ready for top stitching this box stitch. So pick whatever color you're going to use, and I'm going to start on the top left corner of this box stitch. You don't have to go right up to the buckle as long as you're hiding all these layers underneath. So get a nice thick needle, and I'm going to do about a 3.5 millimeter stitch right now. So I'm going to start, and a little back stitch, and go all the way across. and get right up to the edge. So I'm going to pull up my foot and pivot. Now on this stitch down, I'm going to pull the pin out. We won't need that after this. So once we do this, we'll be locked into place. So needle down, foot up. Now I'm going to pull out my pin. That is not going to move anymore. And I'm going to pivot. Okay, in the last stitch we're going to go right back to where we started. Okay, so now once you're back where you started, try to align this so that the bottom corner of your box is going to be right in the path of your sewing. So when you start sewing, you should be headed right towards this bottom point of your box stitch. Okay, now we're going to do a pivot and go along the bottom. We're going to do one more pivot and go the opposite diagonal to the opposite corner, the same way we just did that. Okay, pivot, go across the top right to where we started. Backstitch, and that's it. Okay, so now we got our finished box stitch on our adjustable side, so we're going to get ready to do the other side. Now take your strap that you have left, and I usually put this about 2 inches from the edge, so actually I can just go like that. So about 2 inches from the edge, we're just going to leave this just like that, and then just throw the whole strap over. And we want this to just cover that raw edge right there. And we're going to do the same box stitch right here that we just did on the other side. Except when you do it this side, make sure you try to cover this raw edge with your stitching. So make the box about, I don't know, a 1/4 inch or a 1/2 inch longer than where that raw edge leaves. So I'm going to take a pin. Just put a single pin there just so it won't move. And then something I used to do is I would take a pin and put it right where that raw edge is so I know where it is, so that when I start stitching I know that I need to be on the right side of this pin over here. So I'm going to take this over to my machine and do my second box stitch right here. Okay, so we're going to do the same thing we did last time, same kind of stitch. I'm just looking at underneath here where that raw edge is. I want to start just on the right side of that, so it's going to lock it underneath. Alright, so we got our other box stitch finished. Now, if you were doing this without an adjustable strap, you would just do this to both sides. So you would let this strap run all the way around to the other side, and then attach the other side of your strap right here where we put the other one, and do the same thing where you put this like that, fold it over, pin it in place, and stitch all the way around it. But because we're doing an adjustable strap, we got this thing here. So next I'm going to show you how to put the adjustable bar together right now. Okay, so to make this strap adjustable, we're going to take one more tri-glide. We're going to go in the bottom and out the bottom. Okay, then we can just kind of slide this back for now. And then we're going to go in the front and out the back of the other one. Okay. Now you need to get your other tri-glide back, and we're going to pinch this together so that the buckle falls down. You take the raw edge and you're going to go to the far hole And this is kind of tricky to show. You go in the back, try to loop it around, and we're going to come back out the front side of the tri-glide. And it should look like that. There we go. So you should have a big loop there. So the strap is going under, out, around this buckle, up and under the center bar of this tri-glide buckle, and then out the front. And what we're going to do is, if you pinch these together, the centerpiece, then you can slide this. So this is how it's adjustable. And what we need to do is we're going to do a bar stitch right here underneath this strap. And what it's going to do is it's going to hold this whole thing together. So you can do a bar stitch on this side if you want. I like to do it on the opposite side so that the top stitches show nice right here. But it doesn't matter. You can do a straight stitch, you can do a satin stitch, you can do a bar stitch, doesn't matter. But we're looking to secure this right here, because once this is locked in, we're totally done. And then I will show you how to adjust it once we get to that point. So let's go, and I'm going to do a bar stitch, a real nice, heavy, thick stitch, holding this whole thing nice and tight right here. So here on this side, this box stitch is fixed. This will not move. And going around to the other side of the bag is our adjustable side. So if we lay it like that, we see all of the parts that make this adjustable. So if I move this towards the edge, it's going to get looser or longer, and if we pull it the other way, it's going to get tighter and shorter. So this whole thing is done, and I'm going to zoom out real quick to show you what this whole thing looks like. Okay, great. This is where we're at right now. So we've got our gusset panels, which are attached at the bottom seam. We got our fixed side and our adjustable side. This whole thing is great. So now what we're going to do is we're going to start building the bag around this stuff. So in the next video, I'll start to show you how we start to build the whole rest of the outside. It doesn't take a whole lot. I think we're only about 3 stitches away from having the whole outside of the bag done already. And then we just have to do the lining. So that's how you do the adjustable strap, or you can do a fixed strap if you want. The whole outside is done. This is looking great so far. So I will see you guys on the next video. Alright, good. So we have our adjustable strap and gusset panels all done. I can actually put this on right now. And in the next video, we're going to be finishing the outside of the bag. So thanks for watching this, and I'll see you on the next video.